The last words my father said to me weren't whispered. They were roared, like thunder cracking through the Florida sky. No daughter of mine works in the tech industry. Then came the sound of the front door slamming so hard the picture frames in the hallway rattled. My backpack hit the porch tiles with a thud, unzipped and spilling out wires, a cracked laptop charger, and a half-eaten protein bar. Not exactly the glamorous departure I'd imagined for my big break into cybersecurity. But I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there, in my hoodie and jeans, while the heat clung to my skin like a punishment. My father stood behind the screen door, fists clenched, breathing heavy. My mother lingered behind him, lips pressed tight, eyes doing that thing they always did, searching the floor, looking for a version of me she could explain to her friends. "Lauren, you had an offer at the firm," she said gently. "Your cousin worked hard to get you that spot in finance." "I don't want to audit spreadsheets," I replied, voice shaking but clear. "I want to build something that protects people." That's when my father snapped. He tore the printout of my scholarship acceptance into pieces and flung them into the air like confetti. "You think playing with computers is a career? You're throwing away a future. A real one." I didn't answer. I just zipped my bag shut and walked to my beat-up Toyota, the one I'd bought with savings from tutoring calculus and building amateur firewalls for classmates who downloaded sketchy software. I drove away from that house in Coral Gables with no job, no support, and barely $900 in my account. But in my Dropbox, my prototype. The early bones of an anomaly detection system I'd been building since sophomore year. I moved into a shared apartment in Miami. Tiny, roach-prone, and barely functional. My roommate, Alina, was a bartender who never remembered to take the trash out, but always remembered to bring home leftover fries. She offered me the corner desk in our kitchen as long as I didn't hog the Wi-Fi. During the day, I worked the help desk for a second-tier cloud provider, answering questions like, "Why isn't my screen turning on?" And "Do I need to reboot?" At night, I coded. Lines and lines of messy, unstable, brilliant code that no one would pay me for yet. But I believed in it. I kept telling myself, "You're not wasting your degree. You're investing it." Sometimes I'd see my cousin on LinkedIn. New suits, finance awards, speeches at Dad's firm. And I'd close the tab, bite down on jealousy, and keep typing. The turning point came 6 months later. It was a quiet Thursday night just after 1 a.m. I was testing a script I'd written to simulate data breaches through minor anomalies. Tiny things most systems ignored. My system didn't. It flagged them. Green dot, green dot. Then suddenly, red, a breach. A small one, simulated, but real enough to be detected. My code worked. Not perfectly, not commercially, but functionally. I didn't scream or dance. I just sat there, staring at the screen, whispering to myself, "It works. It actually works." That night, I opened a new folder. Sentinel V 1.0. A year passed. I built version after version. Faster, leaner, smarter. I posted pseudonymous entries on security forums, even caught the attention of a mid-tier investor who said he liked the way I thought, but passed because I wasn't a guy with a Stanford hoodie. I applied to every hackathon within driving distance. I won some, lost more. But every time I presented Sentinel, someone asked me the same thing. "You made this by yourself?" Yes. And no one ever asked who taught me. Because if they had, I would have said, no one. Because the people who should have believed in me didn't. 2 years in, a recruiter from a financial compliance startup reached out after reading one of my public blog posts on credential stuffing. I joined as a security consultant, part-time. The money wasn't great, but the access was gold. Their back-end systems were a mess, riddled with flaws I started documenting privately. I didn't exploit them, but I mapped them. Every vulnerability was a future feature in my own tool. They paid me to see their flaws. I used them to build my strength. One night, Alina came home tipsy and tossed a magazine onto the table. Wired, with the cover story, Top 10 Young Cyber Innovators to Watch. I wasn't on it. But one of the featured guys was quoting a blog post I'd written under a pseudonym. I smiled. It wasn't time yet, because some seeds grow quietly, and some empires are coded in silence. That's what they never understood. They thought silence meant failure, but I was building something they couldn't see. Something that would one day make them pick up the phone and say the words I never expected to hear. Why didn't you tell us? But that comes later. This question mark. This is just the beginning. 6 months after Alina dropped the Wired magazine on our rickety table, I got an email that didn't look like much at first. The subject line simply read, "Request for consult. Urgent breach question." The sender wasn't a big name, just a compliance officer from a mid-sized fintech company I'd never heard of. Let's call it Blue Peak. They'd found one of my blog posts after Googling for anomaly detection in credential leakage. I didn't get excited. These things rarely led anywhere. But when I opened the email, I paused. "We believe we've suffered a silent breach. No ransomware demands, no shutdown, just quiet abnormalities. Would you be willing to review a snapshot of our logs? We'll pay your standard hourly rate. Confidentiality agreement attached." My standard rate didn't exist. I didn't even have an invoice template yet. But I replied with confidence and quoted something that sounded fair. $150 per hour. They replied instantly. "Send over an NDA. We'll pay for 10 hours up front." I sat back, blinking at the screen. This was it. My first real paid cybersecurity contract. Not a support ticket, not a bug bounty, but a proper consulting gig. The breach wasn't dramatic, but it was real. The kind that could quietly siphon customer data for months without anyone noticing. A misconfigured API endpoint buried in legacy code. I spotted it in 48 hours, flagged it, wrote up a patch suggestion, and included a full report. They paid me within the week. Then they asked, "Do you have a tool we could license?" That question changed everything. I stayed up for 3 nights straight refining Sentinel. I stripped it down to the core, added a dashboard, and created a simple UI. Nothing flashy, just functionality. When I sent them the first demo, their head of IT called me. "How is this not on the market?" "I'm still building it," I said. "Well," he replied, "you should keep going." The next few months were a blur. Word spread quietly through cybersecurity Slack groups and compliance message boards. No marketing, just referrals. Quiet emails from firms that had seen me speak anonymously at hackathons or found my code through GitHub. I wasn't trying to build a company, at least not yet. I was just trying to survive and build the best tool I could. But clients started asking for support, then customization, then subscriptions. So I created a simple brand name, Aurora Risk Systems, registered an LLC, built a website with 3 tabs, product, support, contact. I didn't put my name on it. I still remembered my father's words. "No daughter of mine works in the tech industry." Fine. Then maybe he didn't need to know I was his daughter. Alina's bartending shifts turned into full-time operations assistant work. She helped me set up payroll, track expenses, send invoices. She was the first person who treated my project like a real business. Like I was a real businesswoman. "You know," she said one night as we ordered pizza, "your dad's an idiot." I laughed but didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because part of me still believed he'd been right. That maybe I had been foolish, delusional. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe this was all luck. That part of me always whispered in the dark hours. But every time a new client signed a contract or paid an invoice early or thanked me for preventing a silent breach, that voice got quieter. One day, I got a text from my mom. Just a photo. It was my dad, standing with my cousin at a business banquet, both of them in suits, shaking hands with some local politician. No caption. Just the photo. Like she wanted to remind me, this is what success is supposed to look like. I stared at the image for a moment, then opened a second window and compared it to the sales dashboard. Monthly recurring revenue, $22,340. Annual run rate, $268,080. Profit margin, 87%. No venture capital. No partners. Just me, 2 part-timers, and a product no one took seriously until it started quietly saving companies millions. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I clicked Submit on a business license application to convert the LLC into a C Corp. Then came the Forbes email. Not to me, at least not directly. It was addressed to media contact Aurora Risk Systems and landed in our support inbox. Hi, we're compiling our annual 20 under 30 in tech list and would love to speak with the founder of Aurora. Our team has been following the product for the last year and would like to learn more about the story behind it. Could you connect us with your founder? I stared at the screen in silence. Part of me wanted to delete the message. The part of me that still saw myself as the girl my dad threw out of the house like old junk mail. But another part of me, the part that had spent 3 years coding through doubt and imposter syndrome, just smiled. I'm the founder, I typed. Let me know what time works. This wasn't luck. This wasn't noise. This was a signal. The world was finally tuning in. I didn't tell anyone about the Forbes interview. Not Alina. Not my early clients. Definitely not my family. Something about it felt fragile. Like if I talked about it too soon, it would disappear. Like a glitch in the simulation. The interview was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. A video call with a young journalist named Priya Patel. She had this calm, grounded voice and asked me questions that didn't feel like questions, more like conversations I'd always wanted to have. When did you first realize cybersecurity could be your future? How did you handle rejection from people you expected support from? What's your personal connection to this mission? At one point, I laughed. You mean besides the fact that I was thrown out for writing code? She tilted her head. You were kicked out? For choosing tech? I nodded slowly. My dad's a corporate lawyer, old money, traditional values. He said if I wanted to be a computer girl, I could go do it elsewhere. She didn't say anything at first. Then, you know this is going to resonate with a lot of people, right? I shrugged. It's just my life. No, she said. It's proof. That walking away from your family's expectations doesn't mean you failed. It means you had the courage to build your own blueprint. I wasn't ready for how much that line hit me. Courage, blueprint, words I'd never used about myself. 2 weeks passed. No word. Then one morning, I woke up to over 60 unread notifications on my phone. Emails, Twitter mentions, LinkedIn requests, even a voicemail from someone at my old university. Confused, I opened Twitter. There it was. Forbes. Meet Lauren Vega, the 27-year-old founder of Aurora Risk Systems, quietly protecting Fortune 500 companies from the inside out. 20, under 30, women in tech. My face wasn't on the cover, but I was in the lead feature article, second profile, full-page photo. The image was from our interview. Me in a hoodie framed by monitors, with lines of code in the background and a determined look on my face. I blinked at the screen. Then again. It was real. The girl they called incompetent. The daughter they disowned. The nobody who built something in silence. She was now a name on a global list of innovators. That afternoon, my phone rang. Mom. I stared at the caller ID like it had turned radioactive. We hadn't spoken in over 3 years. Not since I left. Not a birthday, not a holiday. Nothing. I let it ring. Then ring again. Then go to voicemail. She called again. The third time, I answered. Her voice was soft, unfamiliar. Lauren? Yeah. Why didn't you tell us? I waited. The silence on my end wasn't bitterness. It was calculation. What did she want to hear? That I missed them? That I regretted anything? I didn't think you'd care, I said finally. We're your family, she whispered. You weren't when I needed one. There was a long pause. Then, your father saw the article. He's shaken. That made me laugh. Short, dry. Shaken because I made it or because other people know? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He wants to talk. I looked around my condo, the office corner with its triple monitor setup, the whiteboard covered in notes for Aurora's next release, my team on Slack debating a new endpoint integration, my calendar filled with investor calls I hadn't even asked for. Why? I asked. Now that I'm worth something? Her voice cracked a little. Because we didn't understand. I swallowed hard. You didn't want to. He wants to meet, just talk. No pressure. I closed my eyes. Old feelings bubbled up. Shame, anger, the kid in the rain picking up her backpack, trying not to cry. Then I heard Alina's voice in the back of my mind. Your dad's an idiot. I'll think about it, I said. Then I hung up. 3 days later, I got an email through our Aurora contact page. The message field just said, please read this. M. Vega. It was from my dad. He'd written a full letter. Formal, typed, like a business memo. Apologizing, sort of. He said he'd reacted emotionally, that he'd feared I was ruining my future, that he didn't recognize the world I was entering, and that scared him. You were building a language I didn't speak, he wrote, and I took my ignorance out on you. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't warm. But it was the first time he acknowledged that he was wrong. At the bottom, he added, I've spoken to the partners at the firm. We'd like to explore securing our infrastructure. I understand Aurora has experience with financial clients. We're willing to pay the audit fee. My eyes narrowed. There it was. The true reason for the outreach. Not reconciliation. Business. That night, I stared at the email for hours. It would have been easy to delete it. Or forward it to Alina with a snarky comment. Or reply with something scathing. Instead, I opened a new tab. I began drafting a client contract. Standard fee. Full audit. No family discount. Because if they wanted to talk now, they could do it on my terms. I didn't respond to my father's email right away. I reviewed it, saved it, then sat with it for 3 days. He'd said a lot, but none of it sounded like him. No condescension, no ultimatums, not even the word disappointment. Just a clean proposal, complete with an offer to pay the full audit fee Aurora charged for new clients. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. And I knew that meant only one thing. They were losing clients. Old-school accounting firms like his were scrambling after a series of cyber attacks hit regional businesses. 2 firms in Miami had been paralyzed by ransomware. A third lost all its internal documents when their backup server turned out to be a decoy created by a rogue IT contractor. Meanwhile, Aurora's name kept appearing in articles about prevention, especially after Forbes. So yeah, they came knocking. Not because they wanted me back, but because they needed me now. I scheduled the initial call through Serena, my new operations lead. I instructed her to treat them like any other client. She didn't flinch. She was the type of woman who had managed M&A paperwork in heels during an earthquake. Full intake form. NDA. We'll follow the standard process, she said. Any personal connection I should be aware of? They're my family, I said. But don't let that change anything. She gave a small nod. Then I won't. The video call was set for Thursday morning. I logged in 2 minutes early. Camera on, microphone muted, just in case they joined early. When they did, it was like stepping into a parallel reality. My father's hair was more gray than I remembered. His tie tighter, like he was choking on his own tension. My mother sat next to him, hands folded too carefully on the table, her smile thin but polite. A junior partner I didn't recognize joined them, probably to take notes or play witness. "Lauren," my dad said, trying to sound neutral. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." I looked directly into the camera. Aurora Risk Systems welcomes all prospective clients. My voice was steady, detached. I saw my mother flinch slightly at the formality, but I didn't soften. Not yet. We walked through the audit process. Compliance standards, threat modeling, endpoint scanning, penetration tests. It was a presentation I'd done a dozen times, but this one felt like performing surgery with a dull blade. At the end, my father cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the scope. We're prepared to move forward with a 6-month contract. We're looking to restore client trust. You understand?" "I do," I said. "But Aurora doesn't guarantee PR outcomes. We prevent breaches. We don't fix reputations." My mother looked down but said nothing. "Of course," my father replied stiffly. We moved to pricing. I quoted the full rate, $60,000 for the initial audit, $10,000 monthly for system monitoring. No negotiation. To my surprise, he agreed. Quickly. "I'll have our finance department wire the payment by Friday." "Then you'll receive onboarding documents by Monday," I said. "Serena will coordinate your start date." He hesitated, just for a moment. Then, "Lauren, is there any room to discuss reconciliation?" "Personally, I mean." That was the first time he dropped the business tone. I paused. The question didn't surprise me. The timing did. But I'd prepared. "I think," I said slowly, "that if this audit goes well and your firm passes our standards without interference or pushback, then we might be able to have a personal conversation. Off the record." He nodded. "Fair." The meeting ended. They disconnected. I stared at the empty call window for a while. Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked out onto the balcony. The Miami sun was just starting to warm the edges of the skyline. I let the breeze hit my face. They needed me now. Not just as a daughter, but as a professional. I didn't know how I felt about that yet. But I knew how to proceed. 2 weeks later, the audit began. Their systems were a mess. No endpoint encryption. Default admin credentials on several databases. Expired SSL certificates on client portals. It was like walking through a building made of glass and finding the fire alarms disconnected. I submitted the initial findings. Then, something unexpected happened. My cousin, Daniel, the one who'd taken the job my father wanted me to have, emailed me directly. Subject: "Hey, we should catch up." Message: "Didn't expect to see you leading this project. But honestly, you were always better than us at this stuff. Let me know if you ever want to grab a drink." I mean it. I stared at the email. He'd never been cruel, just complicit. Silent during dinners when my dad mocked me. Quiet during my graduation when he joked that my diploma should say, "nerd with no prospects." Now he wanted to reconnect? I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. By the end of the month, their firm had passed the audit, but barely. We flagged over a dozen vulnerabilities and patched them with strict protocols. Aurora saved them. No question. I sent over the final report and closed the case. That night, another email landed. This time from my mother. Subject: "Just coffee message. Would you be willing to meet? No agendas, no business, just me and you and a quiet coffee shop. I'd really like that. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. Because maybe, just maybe, the real audit hadn't started until now. I picked the coffee shop. Not out of pettiness, but precision. It wasn't a luxury cafe or some techie startup hangout. Just a quiet corner shop in Coconut Grove, the kind with chip tables, ceiling fans that hummed, and handwritten chalkboard menus that hadn't changed in years. I arrived early, ordered an iced espresso, and chose the booth farthest from the window. It wasn't about hiding. It was about privacy. I'd learned to value that. My mother arrived 12 minutes late. I watched her approach through the door. Pearl earrings, cream blouse, handbag held like a clutch even though it wasn't. Her heels made sharp, rhythmic taps on the tile. I stood briefly, nodded. "Hi, Mom." "Lauren?" she said with a soft smile, eyes flicking around nervously before she sat. "You look successful." I resisted the urge to respond with a smirk. "Thanks, it's been a busy year." She looked down at her folded hands. "I know, I've read everything." I stirred my espresso. "Really? Even the technical stuff?" "Well, the headlines, mostly." She laughed lightly, then quickly stopped when I didn't join her. "You've built something incredible." I nodded slowly. "I did, without any of you." She flinched, just slightly, but she didn't argue. "I want to apologize," she said, "for not standing up for you, for letting him say what he said. I should have—" "You didn't." I kept my voice low, even. "You watched him throw me out. I had nowhere to go, no plan. And you just stood there." Her lips tightened. "I thought it was temporary, that you'd cool off, come back." "I didn't cool off," I said. "I got focused." She looked up and I could finally see the years written around her eyes. Worry, guilt, the wear of missed birthdays and unanswered emails. "He didn't mean it, Lauren. Not really." I leaned forward. He meant it. Every word. That I was throwing away my future. That no daughter of his would ever work in tech. That I was embarrassing the family. A pause. "He's proud of you now." I raised an eyebrow. "He should be." She swallowed. "He doesn't know how to say it." I shook my head. "He doesn't have to." She looked confused. "He doesn't?" I met her eyes. "He had his chance. I'm not here for him. I'm here because you asked. So if there's something you want to say it. But don't speak for him." That's when her voice cracked. "I was scared that if I supported you, he'd turn on me too. I didn't know how to choose between you and my marriage." "I didn't ask you to choose," I said, softer now. "I asked you to believe in me." She wiped at her eye quickly, embarrassed. "You were always so smart, but I didn't understand your world." "That's okay," I said. "You didn't have to understand it. You just had to stop dismissing it." Another long silence passed between us. Just the hum of the fans and the clink of silverware at other tables. "Do you want a relationship with us again?" she asked quietly. I considered that. Really considered it. "I don't want things to go back to what they were," I said. Because what they were was silence, judgment, and pressure. She nodded slowly. "But," I continued, "I'm open to something new, something honest, something where I don't have to shrink to fit someone's image of me." Her eyes welled again. "I would like that." We sat quietly for a while longer. She asked about my office, my team, whether I was dating anyone. The usual small talk parents eventually returned to when the smoke clears. When we stood to leave, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this if you ever made it," she said. "Abuela Rosa?" She nodded. She always said you were building something bigger than we could see. I think she knew before any of us. I took the envelope gently. Inside was a photo of me at 14, hunched over my first computer. One of those clunky white towers we bought secondhand from a neighbor. I had wires tangled across the table and a look of total concentration on my face. Behind me stood Abuela, grinning like she knew something the rest of the world hadn't figured out yet. Tucked behind the photo was a short handwritten note. Mija, they won't see your power at first, but you keep building. The world will catch up. Love, Abuela. I pressed my lips together to keep them from shaking. Thank you, I said, voice barely above a whisper. My mother reached out, unsure. I let her touch my shoulder. Let's do this right this time, she said. I gave a small nod. We'll see. That night, back at my condo, I framed the photo and placed it on my shelf, next to the Forbes magazine and my first check from Aurora. 3 symbols: belief, recognition, independence. I wasn't done building, but maybe, just maybe, I wasn't building alone anymore. 3 months after the coffee shop meeting, I received a formal invitation in the mail. Thick envelope, gold foil lining, embossed lettering. The kind of thing my parents always sent out when they wanted to signal importance. You are cordially invited to the 35th anniversary gala of Vega and Associates. And beneath it, special guest of honor, Lauren Vega, founder and CEO, Aurora Risk Systems. I stared at the card like it was written in another language. There was no personal note, no apology, no explanation. Just my name, centered, highlighted, presented as a headline for the firm that once pretended I didn't exist. My first instinct was to toss it. My second was to frame it out of spite. Instead, I set it aside. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence speak for me for once. A few days later, Serena came into my office holding her iPad. The Vega firm sent a follow-up, she said. They'd like to confirm your attendance. Catering needs numbers. I looked up from my monitor. Did they pay the audit renewal fee? She nodded. Wired it last Friday. Of course they did. I thought for a long second, then said, tell them I'll be there. But I'm not staying long. Serena smiled slightly. Understood. The gala was held at the Coral Gables Country Club. I hadn't set foot there in years, not since I was the awkward cousin at a holiday brunch, trying not to check server logs on my phone while everyone else toasted retirement portfolios and private school acceptances. This time, I arrived in a sleek black suit, hair pinned back, no +1, no parents, no pretense. Just me. The main ballroom looked exactly the same. Arch ceilings, chandelier lighting, and that over-polished marble that always made heels click too loudly. Except now, the room was covered in branding for the future. Innovation, security, growth. And sprinkled among the tables, I saw Aurora's name on guest lists and display screens. My company, once just a folder on a borrowed laptop, was now sharing space with industry giants. I didn't seek out my parents, but I saw them. My mother stood near the entrance, talking to a group of women she probably saw every week. She glanced at me, hesitated, then offered a soft wave. I nodded back. My father kept a distance. He always did in rooms where he wasn't the smartest man present. That used to bother him more than it showed. Tonight, he looked tired. Like someone who knew the narrative had changed and wasn't sure how to catch up. Throughout the evening, old acquaintances approached me. Former classmates, aunts, lawyers I hadn't seen since high school. They all said versions of the same thing. We always knew you had something. Your parents must be so proud. Cybersecurity, wow, didn't see that coming. I smiled politely, shook hands, posed for a few photos. One cousin whispered, You proved them all wrong. But I hadn't come to prove anything. Not anymore. I'd outgrown the need to be understood by people who'd made no effort to understand me. Toward the end of the night, Serena nudged me gently. Your dad is standing by the exit, alone. I glanced over. He was. No spotlight, no microphone. Just a man in a suit who once threw his daughter's future into the rain. Should I get the car? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. I walked slowly toward him. He noticed me, straightened his jacket, and cleared his throat like he was preparing a speech. But when I reached him, I didn't give him the stage. We just stood there for a second. Two people who hadn't spoken in years, not meaningfully. You came, he said finally. You invited me. He nodded. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either. He looked around, lowered his voice. Your grandmother would have loved this. I looked down at the floor, then back up. She did, I said, even when it was just a plan on a napkin. He nodded again. Then, like he wanted to say more but couldn't, he simply offered his hand. I took it. It wasn't warm. It wasn't emotional. It was acknowledgement. Maybe that was enough. Back home, I kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and sat at my desk. The framed photo of Abuela Rosa watched over the room. Next to it, the Forbes feature. And beside that, the original sticky note where I first wrote the phrase, pattern recognition through passive anomaly detection. The idea that started it all. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the envelope my mother had given me weeks earlier. Abuela's handwriting. Her words, her belief. I read the letter again, even though I had it memorized by now. They won't see your power at first. Keep building. And I had. I'd built something real, something valuable, something they couldn't ignore, even if they never fully understood it. Some people are born into legacy. Others write it. And some code it, line by line, in silence, until the world can no longer look away.